So we're going to do another video on the series of what we do to prepare our fouling pieces before they ship. One of the things that separates us from other options available. So the first step is our guard here. This is an investment casting. It comes back all kind of from the foundry, generally all bent and twisted up and stuff. So it's kind of tricky to get everything bent and lined up and to fit the stock. The first thing to do is to file these edges that go in the wood. In particular, this area of the finial needs to be filed because the way it's molded, it actually has draft in the wrong direction. The area that goes into the wood first needs to be smallest. This is kind of opposite. And there's oftentimes some flash on the bottom of it.
Why is it opposite?
Well, just how it's molded. So molding requires draft for the wax to be removed from the mold. And there's different geometry considerations of a guard like this that make it desirable to mold it in the fashion where you would have the bottom a little bigger. A guard like this can be kind of tricky to get release on all the pieces of the mold. Kind of like weighing one thing versus the other. And in this case, it's better to have to file this a little bit and prep it. First thing I'm going to do is clean up this area. Okay, now we're going to use just a coarse little 3-cornered file to clean up all these different areas here. And the key is, my vice isn't holding this great. Jaws are getting worn a little bit. These leather jaws, but let's see if we can make it work. The key is to remove that flash and get a little backdraft. And things like this, we have to work pretty efficiently because when you're doing dozens of these things, time adds up.
What causes the flash?
Flash is from the wax mold, where two pieces of the mold joined together, and if it's anything but perfect, some of the wax will escape out that seam.
So this is where you're making it slightly smaller on the bottom.
Angling it like this. And it's just a little bit. When we talk about draft, it's only a few degrees, 2-3 degrees, something like that is what we generally use. And that allows it to go in the wood and then snug up as it's going in the wood. Now I'm going to go over to the other side here. That's a big area. The flash there. Get rid of that. Now we're going to work around the perimeter again. Come on. And this doesn't have to be perfect. It has to just have paper, and it doesn't have to be polished and finished to a fine level.
So when the customers get their trigger guard, they're still going to need to take it out?
Yeah, they will, because they'll have to install their trigger, and they'll have to polish up the trigger guard. They'll need to install their thumb piece, which installs from below the trigger guard. So they'll still have to take it out, but this is what this is allowing us to do, is to get things fit, because this step can be a little bit difficult, and so we try to make the process as easy as possible for customers. And the reason I say it can be a little difficult is if you're not used to it, it can be sometimes a challenge to get this bent right. But if you get to know what you're doing, you're used to it, like we are here, it can go pretty fast. Probably about in normal production, if things are going well, I think the last time we timed it, it was about 10 minutes. So that's pretty good there. Now we're going to do this grip rail.
Now, I've had a customer say that they like doing this kind of work. Mm-hmm. Is that something that we could offer, is ones that are not fit ahead of time for them? Or
it's a possibility. Anytime we do different things, it confuses things for us in production. So that fact has to be considered. And just kind of weighing the benefit, because sometimes people might think that they want to do this work, but then sometimes that means we end up getting a lot of questions and calls regarding things seemingly not fitting right or problems, when really it's not necessarily that there's a problem. So it's kind of like heading some of these things off at the pass. I know that if we were to supply these in general and not fit on the stock, it would be difficult for many, many people. And we want to make something that people can have success putting together without difficulty. When people have trouble, then it's very difficult to solve problems when over the phone. People are, miles, hundreds of miles apart. Very challenging. So in some ways, to keep things running smooth and keeping customers happy is why we choose to do these sort of things. Okay, so the guard has been filed. One thing to note is typically I would hold a stock right here, but we found out with this gun with the thin lock panel moldings, which they are quite thin, but very historically correct, that if you're not careful, you can break those out. So instead of me clamping it up here and tapping it in, it can break this molding. It's better to clamp it back here on the wrist. We learned that the hard way. Get rid of some of the fuzz in the inlet. That's just a fine wire brush, very fine, about 4,000th diameter bristles. Clean out some of the chips from the inlet, the trigger inlet. Okay, now we're ready to start seeing how it's going to fit. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is put the guard in and kind of do a visual and see how things are lining up. In some ways it's not too bad. Kind of trying to look straight down on the inlet and try to see a little bit. So what I see right now is I see that the finial is off, and I see what appears to be a bow in the grip rail of the guard. Those two things are the biggest issues. We'll hit those first, then we'll come back and see what it looks like. So I'm going to bend this over and take a little of this bow out. Every guard is bent somewhat different. There are patterns, but usually they're different. This finial has to come over a good bit. I can see that.
Have you ever broken one by doing that?
No.
Okay. So brass is pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty malleable.
Forgiving.
Pretty malleable. One thing with this kind of work is you want to be real careful with how you're looking down on it. So you want to look very straight down or it can fool you. And shadows can really fool you with this sort of work too. So you have to be very careful to read it properly. It's not looking too bad. We've got some issues back here. So we're going to try to deal with those because it's kind of twisted. So there's a bend this way on this thing, so we're going to knock it out. Put it on this little bend. See what I can do. Try again here. It's looking better, I think. Now we have a twist to the grip rail, so I'm going to pull that out.
So a twist. Oh,
so this side is low and this side is high.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull that out and just grab the pliers here and give it a little twist. Excuse me, a little twist. Oh, that did help out. A little more twist is what we do.
And now, maybe a dumb question. Why don't you straighten all the guards like on the same stock? Do they have to be fit to the stock? No, we can do it both ways. The stocks are very consistent, so sometimes we'll straighten guards and we'll do it on a sample stock, so it's optional either way. Sometimes does wood need to be removed?
You'll see maybe a little bit of trimming, but not too much. Maybe a little trimming. Okay, so I'm looking at this again, and I see that finial needs to be bent over a little more, and I think it's ready to start going in the stock.
Can I see that? I'm sorry.
That's it.
You move kind of fast.
Yeah, I'm trying to slow down. Okay, let me show you. So you can see if you look straight down on the finial is still a little off. Device, do a little more of a tap. Okay, can you see how that's looking pretty good? I'm just take a little mallet here and I'm going to tap this a little bit to get it started in the inlet. I'm not going to try to beat it all the way in, but it'll be a start. What it's going to do, it's going to show where the areas are that are hitting. You can only do that so much. It's shearing the wood off is what it's doing, but you have to be careful. You can't do it too much or you'll break out the wood and chip it and smash it and crush it. So, and you have to have a sharp corner. So when I filed this, it created a sharp corner on the guard rail. You can do the same thing with inletting color, but this is just generally a little more efficient, but it can cause problems if you're not careful.
So you just do it on one part of it at a time. You're just doing the front, and then you'll fit the front,
so
and then
get
you
the front fully fit, then we'll move to the back. Get rid of that wood that needs to be removed. That's gone. Got a little bit here. Got a little there. Come up here to this finial. Material out. Okay. I'm going to look for more areas. There's a few little areas like right here and some of these points. So I'm going to get a smaller chisel and see if I can work those out just a little bit. Okay. My guess is this finial will fit now. Let's give it a try. It's going in. Now it's a very nice snug fit, as you can see. It may be a little tight in a few areas, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull out again to make sure it didn't pile up material underneath it in any areas. So I'm going to wiggle it. You can come out and do another inspection here. You have to be able to see what you're going to. That's one thing that we work hard to try to teach our employees, that if you can't see, you're not going to be able to do careful work. So you need to be able to see well. When I was younger, I could see well without these, but not anymore. So I have to use these optivisors, which you get used to them. They're not bad. Now, it's a struggle for some to get used to them, though. So that's pretty good. Now, if a fella decided that they wanted it to go in a little looser, it's okay. It takes a little tapping to get it in there. It's not too big of a deal. But if you wanted it to go in a little looser, you could file the edge just a tiny bit more. It'd sit in there a little easier, but I didn't have to do it too hard to get it in. So now we're going to work the finial back. So we're going to start tapping it in. We're going to see what it does. It's going in, but it's probably going to be piling up a little bit of wood. So we're going to not go too far. We're just going to go a little bit to see where it's hitting. Again, you can do this with inletting color if you want. So it's pretty close. It's not piling a lot up. So in this case, we're going to probably just go along and scrape the edge a little bit. Now, if it were piling up a lot of material, we'd come down straight with a chisel and chisel that out. But in this case, it's fairly close. So we're going to come along here. And I'm just using a chisel as a scraper. It can be a snug fit, but you don't want to have to just completely smash it in there. You're going to have problems. There's a limit to how tight you want it to be. Okay. And then alternatively, you can take your guard, your file, and you can file it down a little bit. Just an alternative. This file's a little dull here, but it works good enough, I guess. When you get used to files, you can tell whether they're sharp or dull. One thing that happens, though, if you're not careful, is the file gradually gets dull, so you're kind of like the frog in the pot where you don't realize it's getting dull because it happens over time. front finial in again. Okay, so that's going quite well. It's all in, except the back end there. These guards will vary in length quite a bit, or they can. So the front finial popped up, we'll just bend that down a little bit when we put it in next time. But these can vary in length, and that's because it's a long part, and investment castings can be somewhat different in size. So we try to fit the inlet so it's a little bit on the conservative side. A couple ways you can deal with that on a guard. You can tap it down and leave a mark and trim it. You can also hit it right here. If the finial is down, you could come and hit it right here and drive it back to fit that a little bit. In this case,
because it'll bend the bow rather than, okay.
Yeah. Yep, it'll bend the bow a little. So in this case, we're just going to tap it right here. It'll leave a mark. And pull this out and trim it. So it's not off by a lot, but it is a little bit. And again, take the right chisel. Light's getting in the way here. We're going to trim this. Okay. I believe that's going to work. You can see these little shoulders need to be trimmed a tiny bit. And finally, one other thing that helps a lot on any style of guard when you're inletting down the toe line is to have pretty ample draft, because the way it goes in, you want a good bit of draft, especially on the end. So that will help a lot. So we're going to put a little bit more draft on this. Now I think this whole thing will go in, should be fine. That grip rail is probably a little on the tight side, and it's twisted a little bit. So I'm going to stop right here and do a little better. I'm going to untwist it a little bit. I saw that one side was going down further than the other side. And it's a little bit tight, I think, still. File this a little bit. Find a sharp spot on this file. I could have, like I said, alternatively scraped out the inlet a little bit too. Either way will work. Let's see what's going on. This is okay, I think. I have a little bend there. It's giving me a little more trouble than is typical. Bend it down a little bit so it doesn't want to spring back. I still think it needs a little more twist. Hopefully that'll be better here. It's a little bit popping around a little bit. When we get the pins in, it'll pull it down. Then I hit this down a little bit, the end ones come out. We can try to reshape that a little bit. So there's a little bit of a, you can see an irregularity in the shape of the edge of that, a little bump. So we're going to try to knock that down if we can. And in the end too, when we would pin that, it'll pull it down too. But we're just going to try to straighten up a little bit. And that's what you get with castings. There'll be variations, that's for sure. We'll try to go like this and see if we can't flatten that out a little bit. Iron it out a little bit. Putting the tab between the place jaws. Maybe not perfect. Looks like a little bulge in the casting too, but it's pretty good. This has to be filed anyway, so you can see we've taken out a lot of that irregularity. I think that's pretty good. When we pin it in, it'll pull it all down at one time. It's wanting to pop out a little bit, but it's not too bad. Bend it down a little bit. There, if I hold it down, you can kind of see it. The pins that'll come up next will hold that all in place.
Yeah.
And we do install the pins too. We usually do it in a different step. There's a pin right here that goes through one of the tabs and pulls that down. And then there's a pin here, and then a pin here. So sometimes the wood is slightly high, like right here, there's a tiny bit of wood that's going to be high above the guard. So in the building process, you'll sand that all down so it's all flush. That's why it's important to fit all your parts first. It's it's just we've had some customers want to sand their stock first thing they do. Not just a few customers, and it's just craziness is what it is. You need to build your gun first. You know, you're going to beat it up in the process, number one, and there's adjustments to the stocks so they fit the hardware, and adjustments to the hardware so they fit the stocks. Other people want to polish up hardware first. Don't do it. Because, you know, I'm tapping on this guard, for example, I'm bending it a little bit, I'm grabbing it with vice grips and twisting it a little bit, and it's just a terrible idea. And it blows my mind, to be honest. So build your gun, get everything fit, adjust your stock, adjust your parts, then sand your wood and your metal parts. There are always, even as close as things are, there's always going to be variations. Primarily in this case from the investment casting rather than the stock, but there's variations in everything, just like there's variations in everything in life. We control things very, very carefully, but there's still going to be some very slight adjustment that's going to be necessary often on lots of different areas. Now, some of them might be so slight, some people might not even notice or even care, but you know, we try to work to the level of you'd expect in a high quality custom gun, the level we work to. A nice stock, look, it has a little bark inclusion there. So what that is, that's called ingrown bark. So sometimes the tree will kind of grow around the bark and trap the bark inside the tree, maybe like a fold in the tree, or maybe a scar or a defect where it heals over the bark. And you don't often know, well, you usually don't know where they're going to be until they shape the stock. You know, you try to buy good quality wood that's clear of those sort of things, but sometimes they show up and surprise you. Probably with walnut a good bit, you know. But the nice thing is, that's pretty small, little crack there, tiny. So what we would do to repair that, we would take a little bit of dark CA glue, or even in this case, you can use with walnut, you can use clear CA glue. And just let it go down in that crack a little bit, in that bark. Let it harden, sand it flush. With a dark wood like walnut, you probably never even see it.
Yeah, and discount it a few dollars, and someone's going to get a...
So we'll discount it, and then it'll go to our quick ship, or our B grade stocks. Not that it would make much difference, but you know, we're selling a premium product, and you know, some people would really take offense if we ship them back, so we don't do that.